Pastor Willie, and I'm excited about another privilege to come into your homes to share with you some deep truths, some wisdom, and hopefully even some laughs as we talk about not just showing love or sharing love and receiving love, but actually being love. At Be Love, we believe that we embody love and unleash life. And today we have a significantly important conversation partner, somebody who I love. This sister has my heart in a lot of ways. It feels like I've known her my entire life. We have Susan Korngut, who is an attorney, but she is also an elected official, and she is with us today. Susan, welcome to Be Love TV.
Thank you so much. Look, let's start this off right. I have heard that you've been having all these guests on speaking about very intelligent topics, very serious topics. Look, I'm proud and honored to be among your inaugural guests. So let's just start this off correctly, though, because I'm going to guess that not one guest has come on here and stripped. So let me just get this started correctly, because I don't whip this out too often. But for you, we've got Diana Ross concert T-shirt, probably circa 1990-something. Just want to make sure we're doing this correctly. Entertaining people stuck at home in the quarantine.
Susan Korngut, everyone. Yo, I'm so happy you're doing this. Susan and I, we have a show on a regional radio station, WEHA. And the name of our show is Side Pieces.
Only you could get me out of my pajama pants and sports bra. So let's get this going. I'm not sure how much time we have. I'm just so excited to be here with you, for you, and to be a part of this, because anything you touch is gold, should be gold, because you're incredible, and Atlantic County is so lucky to have you.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, goodness. Thank you. Keep going if you must.
Well, you know what people also don't know? That I just texted you because tomorrow is our 1-year anniversary of when we met.
Wow. Yes. We met celebrating Dr. King. That's so us. That's so us, right?
I'm honored to be included among that, because, right, it is so you, so I hope so.
Good. So, Susan, one question I ask, the first question I ask every guest on Be Love TV is, what makes you come alive?
Ooh, what makes me come alive? That's a great question. I think a tactic to stall is when people repeat the question. So I'm going, but if I had to think about it, honestly, what makes me come alive, I would say, is fairness, justice. And that's not a BS answer, because I get so excited about the right result, whether it's in my personal life, my professional life. Like you said, I'm a family attorney. Much of what I do, divorce, child support, custody, anything like that. But I get very frustrated when we don't get what I perceive to be the right result, because I think people go to court and think that the right thing is going to happen, and that a bright light is going to shine upon you. And I say to people all the time, it's not about what happened, it's about what we can prove. So oftentimes it's not about the truth. So when they line up and we can do a good job and paint that picture for the judge, and the right result happens, I get so excited. So I really have a passion for what I do, and I grew up in my house being sort of the judge, the mediator, trying to make things right, and especially what I do in my professional life too involves children. So I'm crazy about making sure the right thing happens.
That makes sense. So it's quite possible that because people are quarantined for as long as we may be quarantined, that your business may go up.
Look, I heard a rumor that you had a license, or you're going to have a licensed marriage and family therapist on, so I have a bone to pick with you, because that's bad for my business. So stop trying to jack me up and ruin my business. You don't need people getting along during this time. Look, if you are fighting with your spouse, your significant other, they're probably a horrible person. You don't need them. Don't try to get along with them. It's over. You should have come to me a long time ago. Now you're cooped up and you can't get away.
She will get you through this divorce with everything you want.
Korngut with the K.
All right, Susan.
I'll get your freedom. That's what I'll guarantee.
So, Susan, we're in the middle of one of definitely the worst health crisis of my lifetime. Perceivably one of the worst in the past century. And this is happening during an election year, right? Many states have already primaried, and some of them had to decide whether or not they were going to stay in to protect their health or whether they were going to go out and cast a vote for at this point, a Democratic nominee for president, right? So there's some serious intersections between this the coronavirus, COVID-19, and our election season. I just want you to just say very clearly, why have we been failed so miserably by our federal government during this process?
Is this a real question?
It's because I just want to hear you say it. I love when you talk badly about the president.
The fact that you call him the president annoys me. So that just tells you something. I am Team Ayanna Pressley, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, and I call him.
Shout out to the Boston congressperson.
We will refer to him as the occupant of the White House.
Yes.
But it's clear that he's dropped the ball, and I think that in the past, if Obama was still there, we would feel that we were in good hands. I know that he is not your favorite person to talk about.
He is my favorite president, though.
Right. Okay. Good.
I just have deep criticisms of him, but he is my favorite president.
Right. But we've just been failed on so many levels by this administration. Sure. They knew about it. They did nothing. They went golfing. They played it down. They thought it would be bad for the economy. They put money over people and people's health and security. And I think they're still doing it.
How much of it do you think is just gross incompetence, right? It's like maybe not ill intent, maybe not maliciousness, although I know that exists with much of what happens in Washington. That does exist. But just gross incompetence. Like, there's an entire agency, there's an entire task force that was put together by the last administration to handle pandemics. And that was dismantled.
But
that's incompetence.
But at some point, incompetence implies some sort of passivity. Uh-huh. So trying to undo anything Obama did, that's intentional. And at some point, a gross incompetence becomes willful, becomes intentional.
Becomes malicious.
So he has been briefed. He knew. And when you say, I don't want to learn, hand me my golf clubs. I mean, let's be real. Anybody who knows anything knows this guy didn't want to be the president.
Mm-hmm. And there's also signic intellectual limitations that exist in the White House right now.
Absolutely, right.
In the Oval Office.
Right. So he's not bright, never was. Back in the day, bankruptcy would have been something tragic and something to be embarrassed about. And this guy brags about it.
Sure.
So if you've had a personal bankruptcy, I'm not saying you should be embarrassed by that, but that would certainly be something that would make you think twice if you were going to run for president. Sure. So when you brag about how you bankrupted people, that means you didn't pay your bills. Sure. That means you screwed people. That means the little people, that means you and I paid his bills. I remember one time, my dad died when I was a kid, and he was a businessman, and I remember talking to him about paying taxes because I had heard something on TV about businessmen and paying taxes and getting out of paying taxes or something like that, something political I had heard as a kid. And I'll never forget it. My father said, Susan, if I don't pay my taxes, someone else will.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Susan.
He was very aware of how fortunate he was, and he worked very hard. But plenty of people work hard and can't get ahead.
So right now we're seeing the jobs numbers are staggeringly offensive for the richest country in the world. And we know this is connected to the health crisis.
Good news, though. We're going to get money to the banks. Doesn't that make you feel better?
The banks, the big businesses, everybody's getting bailed out, but America, people who live in the U.S., to hear the president say, when asked by a reporter, there are undocumented people who work in this country, love this country, serve this country, pay taxes in this country through some way or another, and none of them are getting stimulus checks. And he essentially said they shouldn't have been here in the first place. That kind of racism, I think, is symptomatic of how I have come to understand the Republican Party, but it's endemic in both parties, right? There is, and I know you're a Democrat. You are an elected Democrat at that. Your party's racist.
Did you see that striptease?
Yep.
I'm probably not elected at this point. There's probably a vote being taken somewhere to rectify that situation, I'm sure.
Actually, I mean,
there's going to be a movement.
You know, I mean, there's a reality TV star in the White House, so I think being an entertainer actually may bode well for a career in politics.
Korngut 2020, just write me in. You know who's my vice.
Who's that?
Would be my vice.
That would be me, right? Yeah, I've always wanted to
It should be vice versa. You should be at the top.
I appreciate no. I don't want the job at all. I can't preside over the empire. But
do you see what's going on now? I think just showing up would be.
Susan, I want you to be honest about the racism and the sexism that exists in the Democratic Party. Like, we often give the Democrats a pass. Right. Even now, we're celebrating Nancy Pelosi for some of the things that have hit the ground for working people. But what we know for sure is that non-white and women workers are not going to have the kind of resuscitation that they deserve, and it's because the ruling parties in this country are many things, but particularly racist and sexist.
I think that, we give the Democrats a pass because there's no other choice, typically. So Democrats are less bad than the Republicans when it comes to racism.
So you're saying we should start our own party?
You know what's a shame? That the independent party gets a bad rap, and the powers that be, meaning the money behind the Republican and the Democratic Party, spend a lot of money to discredit any other party, because both parties at the end of the day want to make money for their people, for their donors. So that is the goal of both parties. Like I said, that movement's getting stronger. Now it's bipartisan to get me removed from office, I'm sure, after having pulled the cover back on what's really going on. So that's really what it's about. So, you know, if you really look at a lot of what's going on in the Democratic Party, it's the same thing, and certainly at the local level. They push women and people of color to the bottom of the ticket. Of course, in South Jersey, I mean, it's controlled by one power broker. So that's a little bit of a different story, but it's the same result.
So we are down to we're down to 2 white men for.
I'm sorry, I just fell asleep.
Wait,
say it again. I know, we had such a great, I mean, nobody's
the most diverse
perfect.
field in the history of the party, in the history of the country.
And now we're down with 2, I think we should just like have them.
2 white men in their 70s.
I think they should just have to play who's smarter than a 5th grader, and the winner wins the election. No
matter who wins right now, the president is going to be a 70-year-old white rich man.
With dementia. And the vote has now been cast.
I'm not qualified to make medical assessments in that way.
I'm not a doctor. Or do I have to put that out? Because that's right. I don't want to be sued by either party. Because they're watching.
You know they are. They
Their
better be
constituents
watching,
are watching.
Right? It's Beloved Nation. They better be watching this, right?
They better. They should be. Guess what? God, no. That would involve learning something. Yeah.
But so the racism that exists, the sexism that exists, how is this connected to white privilege?
Well, let me, you know, it's all connected to white privilege, because that's the very definition. The fact that more qualified people of color and women ran, and now we're down to these old white men. And I think that there's been a lot, like I said, a lot of money spent, and who controls the money? It's white people. So, you know what, we were talking the other day on our show about white privilege. What I said was white privilege, and you disagreed and said, no, it's whiteness. When I said, you have all these people who just killed themselves here, running for office, running all over this country, incredible candidates, incredibly qualified candidates, like Kamala Harris, and who was, of course, my pick. But and now we have a white guy, the governor of New York, goes on, does a few good press conferences, and everybody says, you know, he should run instead of Biden. Not all these incredibly competent women or people of color, or God forbid, a woman of color to lead this country. But you said you don't think that's white privilege. You think that's whiteness.
I think that's whiteness. It's a structural knowledge that works beneath the consciousness. We don't even know we're doing it. And the reason why I don't call it white privilege is not because white people don't benefit from it, and it's not because white people don't take that for granted, that this old, rich white man, because Governor Cuomo's rich too. This old, and comes from a very strong political family, this old rich white man should be our leader. As an assumption, it is both white privilege to the extent that white people benefit from it and white people can take it for granted. But I call it whiteness, right? It is a symptom of white supremacy because it exists outside of white bodies. There are black minds and black bodies that would agree to that. There are Latinx minds and bodies that would agree to that. There are Asian minds and bodies that would agree to that. And that's because the structural logic of whiteness lives underneath this surface. That at some point we have all been soaked in white supremacy to the point that that makes sense to all of us. That, yes, Governor Cuomo seems like the best alternative to Trump because he's a white, rich man just like Trump is. That's white privilege, but I think it's more significantly labeled whiteness because of how it infects and how it works in non-white people as well.
And we saw it with Bloomberg.
I'm so glad that nightmare is over, though. But
we have Elizabeth Warren to thank for that.
Shout out to Liz. We just did 2 shout outs to 2 Massachusetts elected officials, both women. I think that means something. I spent some time in Massachusetts, so I do have, it's in my heart there,
There's good stock there, I'll tell you what. They come from good people there, and they know what they're doing. Elizabeth Warren would have been a great president.
I think so, too.
Congresswoman Presley, love her. She'd be a good president.
Let me ask you a question. What do, in this election year and beyond, what do we need white people to do to end racism? Because it ain't black folks' job to save white people from themselves. And we've been carrying that burden for too long.
Here's the problem. At the core, I don't think white people, well, do white people want to end racism?
Most of them don't even believe it exists.
Right. So I don't know. I mean, clearly I haven't done a survey, right? But
this is all anecdotal.
All white people, right?
Because I do know all white people too.
But I have felt a shift in the room when I've been giving a speech and speaking with, and even many people who one would consider woke, white people in the audience. And when I mention white privilege, and then you hear like a balloon, like deflating a little, because they're like, well, I don't know, I got to give that up too. Wait, I don't really know if I want to do that. Wait, is that part of this? That part I liked. So I think on some level, the question has to be, a shift in people's thinking, white people's thinking, to really understand that that's something that they need to want to give up. And I don't understand how people don't get it, how the world's a better place when everybody has the same opportunity. I don't understand how that's not a natural feeling, that you should feel horrible, that when the police come to your house, your worst fear is that if they're running around in your yard. I saw this woman, and she said her worst fear when she called the police was that that he might shoot her dog. And she said she knew that was white privilege, because if she'd been black, her worst fear would have been that they would have shot her. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand and don't realize. And I think people hear privilege and they immediately maybe tune out and think my life has been hard. So I think people don't understand. We're not saying that white people don't have hard lives. White people don't have difficult lives. So certainly I obviously have people in my family making minimum wage, working all their lives, unable to save. So and who are going to take issue with me, and I'm going to hear about it when I talk about this. So it's not about that. It's about the color of your skin making your life harder.
Yeah. So I'm smiling because there are so many white people who just lack stamina for conversations about race and racism. So to even have a conversation, a white on white conversation about race and racism, what does that, how do you get there? What does that even look like? How do you invite people who really have racial fatigue, right, who are fragile when it comes to these types of conversations. How do we start to have those, how do you all start to have those conversations in your community so my people can stop being killed, fired first, harassed, stalked by police, becoming victims of the politics of protection? How can you all start having these conversations? Not just those of you all who are woke, but those of you all who are, because there's a difference between being woke and being an anti-racist. I consider you in the school of people who are ongoing anti-racists, who are always evolving, always trying to always trying to exercise the evilness of white supremacy out of you. I consider that anti-racism. How do anti-racists, white anti-racists, start to have those conversations with people who claim to be woke and people who are just moderate? Where do those conversations start?
Thank you. Well, the question is also about bringing them, how do we bring them to the table, too?
Sure.
Do you like how I keep answering your questions with questions? But because I guess the real answer would be I really don't know, because when I've had these conversations with people who you would certainly consider anti-racist, our friend Eva and
Sure.
Dr. Christine Ruth, and just so
Sure.
many great people on the
Two
front
people I
lines
love,
here,
yeah.
right? And whenever we gather people for these conversations and get white people together, I mean, unfortunately, it's often like-minded people. So how do we reach the other people? Because even though we can all grow
Sure,
and evolve,
sure.
the question is to really reach the people who don't get it and
Sure.
who don't know, and how do you make them listen? I just finished reading Anthony Ray Hinton's book, The Sun Does Shine, and he was, he was on death row for almost 30 years for
Sure,
a crime he did not
sure.
commit, African-American man, and he talked about how he struck up a friendship with the guy in the cell next to him, and he couldn't see the guy. And one time somebody said to him, "Do you know who that is?" And it was a white guy who who was in the KKK and killed somebody in a very violent way. And Anthony Ray Hinton said, "Look, my mom taught me compassion, love. That's how I'm going to treat him." And when this man was executed, the white man was executed, he said, "All my life I was taught to hate the very people who showed me love and compassion at the end of my life." And so, I think there are a lot of people there, they were forced together.
Yeah.
So I think it should be in the curriculum. I think there should be a course on, certainly on African American history should be part of the curriculum.
Sure.
White privilege, just like every type of injustice that you should be learning about instead of the glorified history that is now part of the curriculum.
Shout out to Brian Stevenson, who's responsible for working that case and having that overturned for Brother Hinton. Brian Stevenson is doing amazing work. In fact, recently I was just at the memorial in Alabama that Brian Stevenson put up through the Equal Justice Initiative. And so big shout out to Bruh, who is really doing the work to end mass incarceration. So we're talking about racism. We got to get to this 2020 election a little bit. What we know for sure is black and brown people are going to be significantly impacted, disproportionately impacted by the effects of corona, if nothing else, the economic impacts of corona. Their lives are going to be thrown into economic limbo in ways that we can't imagine. We know Trump's a racist. We know that Biden has done some racist-adjacent things in his past. One of those things.
Racist adjacent.
Racist adjacent.
I'm not so sure they were adjacent, but okay.
Well, mass incarceration is definitely racist. I was just trying to be a decent Democrat right
Anita
now.
Hill, was that
party person?
Was that racist or misogynist?
Both. I think it was. I mean, it's white patriarchy, right? That's white patriarchy, and Biden is guilty of white patriarchy, right? He's guilty of racism. He's guilty of sexism in his past, and he has not atoned for those things, like most white men have not. He's not atoned for those things. Let me ask you this: it's 2020. Is beating Trump enough? Is that all we want?
No way, because it's a start.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like that would be like putting a Band-Aid over something that's that over cancer, a cancerous lesion.
Yeah.
Because really it's what he represents.
Yeah.
And it's not enough that we pull together 51% of the population, or in this case, or get the electoral vote, because we had 50% of the country voting for Hillary. Right.
Because you can win the majority of the votes and still lose the
I
presidency.
think, right. So I think education is really the only way.
It's happened twice in my lifetime.
Yes, which tells you something, and both ways, the way it went.
And the Republican won both times.
Yeah. So I think education is really the only way. And I don't know if we're going to see that in my lifetime, but that's what we should be pushing for, is a curriculum where we have a captive audience and they learn it from being very young, because once you're older, we know that not everybody wants to continue to learn and grow.
That's real.
Right.
Susan Korngut, this has been a privilege having you on Be Love
I did not
TV.
even lightning round you or get to make out with you. Ugh.
Okay.
This quarantine's killing me.
We can potentially do the lightning round.
All right.
But we will not do.
We can't. We're
the
quarantined.
making out
We're
on
responsibly
TV.
social distancing.
And we are 6 feet apart. If people don't realize, we are 6 feet apart. And I know it's killing Susan, but we have to do it.
But let's see. It's killing me that I'm far apart. Wait, because. Right, that we're not getting to cuddle like we usually do. When you tune into Side Pieces on WEHA, we cuddle. We have like 2 minutes of just silent hugging. That's how the show begins.
Just radio silence, and people are like calling in, trying to figure out if there's something wrong with the line.
So now this is a game that is sweeping the nation. It's the lightning round. Pastor and I play, and
I always do poorly at this.
That's right, because there's a score. So he has to answer these questions within 5 seconds or less, or his head explodes. Everything he holds dear will come to a crushing end. Here we go.
Be gentle.
Number one, if you could travel anywhere in the world, where would you travel?
Burkina Faso.
We know the quarantine is horrible, and of course there's loss of life. But if we want to say that there's one good thing for you that's coming out of it, on a lighter note, is there anything good about the quarantine, or what's the best part for you of the quarantine?
The ability to see how creative I am in adapting in things like this.
And how about the worst part for you personally?
Just being away from people that I love, having a already limited freedom as a black man in this country being limited even more.
So great. What do you miss most about your childhood?
My grandmother.
If you heard that Corona killed one person you would not be sad about, who would it be? We go back to the occupant of the White House.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
right. My only regret would be that it was not sooner. And
pass.
I can say it because I'm I'm white on the outside, so I can say it. Otherwise, you would be in trouble. But I can say, because now
what kind of pastor would say that?
Right, but the Secret Service will now be here. But if I say it, but still, okay. 3 words to describe yourself.
Intelligent, funny, charismatic.
What's your biggest regret in life?
That I did. My biggest regret is that I missed the 5 seconds. Let's see. My biggest regret.
You're doing my trick, which is repeating the question. Susan, or do my thing. What you should ask.
I don't really live with regrets, but one thing I wish I had done, I wish I had finished a PhD 7 years ago.
Okay. Something people would be surprised to know about you.
That I used to be a musician, and I was a drum major, and I could really, really dance.
And that we're engaged. What celebrity do you think would be fun to hang out with?
Kevin Hart.
Do you think that aliens exist?
Yes.
If you could romance one member of Northfield City Council, who would it be? That is how you play the lightning round. Come on. Come on. 5, 4.
Susan Korngut.
There you go.
Susan, thank you for being with us today. Be Love Nation, you've had a significant demonstration, exhibition of what we do every Tuesday, what we do all week long, actually, via text, really. And so thank you for tuning in. We want you to share. We want you to like. We want you to retweet, repost. We want you to email. We want you to get this to as many people as you can. We're growing the Be Love Nation. And so as you keep coming back, know that we'll be here next week. But guess what? Until then and beyond, be love. Peace.